looking for? The guy doesn't drink, goes to church every day.
Faith, family, country. Those are the things that matter.
Come to admire him, I see.
Yes.
Respect him?
I never cared about making headlines. Wanted to make history.
He's a traitor, Eric. Started spying for the Russians in 1985. Good news is you're in the middle of the biggest case we've ever run. The damage he's done to the U.S. government is in the billions. It might be years before we truly know how many deaths he's been responsible for.
Why don't we just arrest him?
Can't do that. Director wants him caught in the act.
What if he's smarter than I am?
He spent the last 20 years outthinking Russian spies. He's smarter than all of us.
Have you been in my briefcase?
No.
Don't like being scrutinized. Have to do something about that.
He's parked outside your apartment.
Where were you?
I'm telling so many lies now, I can't keep them straight anymore.
Are you finding this job stressful?
Sometimes.
Pray more.
He knows the names of every source we've ever turned. Their lives are all at risk.
I need to know if I can trust you.
What are you doing?
Who is calling you in the car?
Put the gun down!
I need to know if I can trust you!
I want to start you off with a story before I get into all the cybersecurity. And it takes place on a very cold day in February, a Sunday. Robert Hanssen has just had the best day of his life. His kids are in town, and he's got 6 of them, and they have assorted grandkids. His best friend is in town from Germany, this guy named Jack, and they go out back. They throw a Frisbee with his Labrador. His wife cooks this amazing brunch. They all go to church together. They have dinner together. And at the end of this wonderful day, he drives his friend to the airport. Those familiar with Washington, D.C. will know Dulles Airport's one of our big ones, just in Virginia, not too far away from his home. And his friend has visited many times, but for the first time, he doesn't park and walk in with his buddy. Remember those days? So I'm dating this a little while. This is in 2001, February. Drops him off, says, "See you later, next time you come around," and drives off. And he parks on his way home in a small little park called Foxstone Park in Vienna, Virginia. It's a stone's throw from his house. Gets out of his car and walks down this small path into the park. His breath is frosting in front of him. It's bitterly cold in Washington, D.C. It's bitterly cold right now. It's bitterly cold here. It's kind of bananas, right? But it's cold for him. And the important thing is, because it's winter, autumn has stripped the leaves from the trees, and he can see all around him. He reaches a footbridge in the center of that park and stands on it, looks around and makes sure that there's no one there. And when he feels safe, he reaches into his sport coat and he pulls out a package about that big, steps off that bridge, and clambers under it. Now, he's about 6'4", and this is a little bridge, so getting under there is not easy, but he's done it many times before. And he reaches under there and slides that package under the bridge into the superstructure where it's going to be safe from the casual observer. And it's wrapped in trash bags and packing tape, so it's completely protected from the elements. Climbs back on the bridge. He knocks the dirt off his shoes and he smiles to himself because he has just loaded his final drop to the Russians after 22 years of espionage. Think about that for a moment. 22 years of espionage. That means, if this is 2001, that he started spying in the 70s for the Soviet Union and continued spying through the 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed and was reformed into the Russian Federation. Now that's important. If you worked in counterintelligence like I did, the important thing about that is when the Soviet Union collapsed, they fired a lot of the KGB line officers. They reformed the KGB into 2 separate services and, reshuffled and got rid of some of the people who weren't working out so well, as you do when you restart a business. Those guys were not going to leave their position at the high end of the spectrum and go work a farm. I mean, their swords were not going to be beat into plowshares. They'll go work some dacha somewhere. No, what they did is they stole information. And back then, they had to steal information from the places we used to keep information. Some of you are old enough to remember this. File cabinets. Remember those things? You don't see them anymore, anywhere. You go to any business, there's no file cabinets anywhere. They've all been auctioned off, or like the family take the file cabinets day, to your house and put our junk in your house. They're gone. All those old file cabinets, remember, used to be like manila folders with paper in red wells, like stacked, and there were administrative assistants who were the only people who knew how to find this stuff, right? It's all been digitized and put into databases. But back then, it was files, and these old KGB guys were stealing the files, and some of them were selling them immediately, usually to the United States or the Brits, who were paying top dollar for this stuff, and we were rolling up all these spies, all these old Cold War spies. Some of them kept the files for later, for a rainy day, but we never caught Robert Hanssen. And during his time, I love to show that clip because, look, let's be real. I'm an okay speaker, but Laura Linney is an Academy Award-winning actress. She can talk about what Hanssen did way better than me. But to add to all the things he stole, including nuclear secrets, lives that were lost, undercover operations that were blown before we started, we were losing to the Russians for decades. He gave up something that is somewhat more, a little less known, a tunnel. So we had built, this is crazy, right? It's totally true. I had to call when I heard this. We'd built a tunnel under the Russian embassy on Tunlow Road in Washington, D.C. Dug a tunnel right under the embassy and put a listening device right there under their embassy. And we were listening to everything they said. Can you imagine, if you work in counterintelligence, how golden an opportunity it is to hear everything that's being said in an opposing nation's embassy on your own soil and them not know it? Well, it's too bad, because even before we finished the tunnel, Hanssen had given it up. So follow me here. Let's see how many of you could be counterintelligence operatives. If they know that we don't know, that they know that we've got a super secret tunnel and we're listening to everything they're saying, what can they do? That's right. Feed us false information. And they did for years. Stuff we thought that was golden about operations that they were pretending to do, that was just throwing us off the track and wasting the time of people working undercover. So he was a really bad guy. I could spend the entire time I have talking about what he did. But the fact of the matter was how he did it that's important. He wasn't just the worst spy in U.S. history, certainly the worst spy ever to be a trusted insider, a rogue employee within the FBI. He was our first cyber spy. Think about that. Robert Hanssen looked at the future of information. He realized that data was going to become what it is today, the #1 currency in a completely interconnected world. There's nothing today more valuable than data. There are even complete currencies that only exist in data, that are worth a fortune, that don't actually exist anywhere. I'm talking about things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? Data. And he realized that at that time, the intelligence community had not thought about cybersecurity. We hadn't even coined the phrase yet. We called it InfoSec, or information security, and various other things. And so he attacked computer systems that were never meant to defend a rogue employee from the inside. And he stole his information that way. He was our first cyber spy. And the important thing here, the one thing I want to start with and leave you with, is this: there are no hackers. Let that sink in. I don't like the term hacker. I hear it all the time. I correct people when I'm on the news. I correct people when I'm speaking at conferences. There are no hackers. There are only spies.